We need less security theater and more speed, he said, eyes scanning my work like it was holding the company back. That's the moment I knew I was in trouble. My name is Kevin Rourke, 40 years old, and for the past 9 years, I was the lead security architect at Trivar Systems, a financial tech firm based in Seattle. I'd built our security infrastructure from scratch, layer by layer, system by system, protecting the sensitive data of over 300 clients. When I joined, we were a scrappy startup. Now, we had over 300 employees, 2 offices, and a reputation for never having a single breach. That reputation was mine. But that didn't matter to our new CTO, Brandon Kerr, freshly hired and buzzing with words like agility and modernization. Brandon was quick to call my protocols outdated. He didn't care that I'd built custom defenses when the company wouldn't invest in enterprise solutions, proprietary firewalls, handcrafted intrusion detection patterns, a homegrown access control system. I kept it all running on a shoestring budget and nearly no support. Yet when I tried to explain why each part existed, why security wasn't just about speed, Brandon shut me down. No time, he said, before moving on to launch a faster client portal. What he didn't realize: the systems I built didn't just run deep. They were the only thing standing between us and disaster. By the following week, things had already started shifting under Brandon's leadership. Quiet changes at first, compliance reviews shortened, approvals for minor firewall updates rerouted through general IT. Then came the real punch: my access to our security logs was revoked. I thought it was a mistake. I even called the help desk, half laughing as I explained I couldn't view the forensic logs I'd personally configured. But the tech on the line wasn't laughing. New directive from the CTO's office, he said, almost apologetically. Security logs are now merged into the general IT dashboard. All under one roof, merged. That system didn't have half the capabilities I'd spent years building. It was meant for surface-level performance monitoring. Nothing like the deep forensic trace tools I'd custom built for intrusion detection. It couldn't even distinguish between packet anomalies and standard traffic bursts. I'd flagged it as inadequate in every quarterly report. That night, I sat alone in my home office, a pit in my stomach, and copied my personal documentation onto a private flash drive. Not client data, just my own system architecture and security protocols. Call it instinct or foresight. 2 mornings later, something caught my eye. 3 login attempts, unusual location tags, all hitting our Eastern gateway. At first glance, it looked like noise. But my custom-built alert system, the one no one else even knew existed, flagged it twice. A red light blinked at the corner of my screen. No one else noticed. I stared at that blinking light, a cold dread settling into my bones. I thought back to how it all began. I'd left a stable position at a government contractor nearly a decade earlier to join Trivar. I believed in what we were building. We weren't just another tech startup. We were building secure, intelligent financial systems long before fintech became a buzzword. Back then, we didn't have the money for enterprise firewalls or big, name security appliances, so I built our defense layer by layer from scratch. Proprietary scripts, custom VPN configurations, a decentralized access control structure that kept client data siloed. It wasn't flashy, but it worked, and it worked well. Over time, Trivar grew. We got big, successful. But the skeleton of the system stayed the same: my code, my architecture. There was only one problem. I was the only one who truly understood how it all worked. Our former CTO, Jessica Lane, used to joke, "If Kevin ever gets hit by a bus, we're going to need a priest and a miracle." She wasn't wrong. I'd asked for documentation support, time to build manuals, train backups. But every time I requested it, the answer was the same: later. Later never came. When Veriton Capital acquired Trivar, Jessica was pushed out, and Brandon came in with his streamline and scale pitch. He didn't want to hear about layered security or risk matrices. He wanted velocity, rapid releases, faster development cycles. As if speed alone would keep us ahead of competitors. Even Diane, our senior product lead, noticed it. Over lunch in the courtyard, she leaned in, speaking softly. "Brandon's gutting QA. We're down to smoke tests and luck. What about compliance audits?" I asked. "We're interpreting the requirements," she said, rolling her eyes. Brandon's words. That same afternoon, James, my direct report and a sharp engineer, stopped by my desk, concern etched on his face. Brandon asked me why firewall rule changes take so long. I explained the layered testing protocols, but he kept asking if we could just skip steps during emergencies. Skip steps. That was like removing airbags to improve gas mileage. I stayed late that evening, checking my dashboards again. No new alerts. Just the 3 from earlier. Still there, still flagged. I added a note to the log, timestamped, and emailed it to myself. Then came the meeting request. Subject security team restructuring from Brandon Kerr, time Thursday, 2:00 p.m. location. Conference room B. My stomach sank. Thursday came fast. I sat across from Brandon and an HR rep named Heather, a thick manila folder in front of her. I didn't need to open it to know what was inside. Brandon kept it civil. We're transitioning security responsibilities into individual product teams. More agile, less centralized. Who's maintaining the core infrastructure? I asked. We're moving to cloud-native tools, managed externally. That was it. 9 years reduced to a scalability chart and a severance folder. I gave them my credentials, signed the forms, and walked out past the company's trophy wall. Plaques that read Best in Data Security and Client Trust Leader 5 years straight. They didn't even know what they were dismantling. I drove home that afternoon in silence, gripping the steering wheel with white knuckles as the weight of it all settled in. 9 years of protecting Trivar's digital infrastructure, gone with a single meeting. I wasn't angry. Not really. Just stunned. Hollowed out. The next morning, out of habit more than anything, I opened my laptop. My home network had a mirrored, offline version of my custom-built alert system. It was something I'd cobbled together years ago, meant for sandbox testing. But it still pinged me if anything looked unusual. And there it was again, another alert. This one was different. It wasn't a login attempt. It was lateral movement. One system trying to access another across what should have been isolated silos. My data segmentation protocol should have stopped that cold. I leaned back, rubbing my eyes. They were already pulling pieces apart. That afternoon, James texted me. Kevin, we've got weird traffic patterns on the East Gateway. Nobody knows what to make of it. Can you hop on a quick call? Part of me wanted to ignore him. Let Brandon and his buzzwords take the fall. But James wasn't the problem. And I couldn't just sit by while the thing I built burned down. Did anyone check the dual auth logs? I asked over the phone. He paused. What's that? My heart dropped. The secondary verification system. It confirms intrusion alerts from the primary layer. If both are lit up, it's real. James clicked through the interfaces I guided him to. Tools nobody else even knew existed. Oh man, he whispered. They're both triggered. Okay, you need to isolate the gateway immediately. Shut down external access and reroute to the backup line. I can't, he said. They didn't give me admin rights to the routers. Said it was all getting handled by a third-party vendor now. Of course they hadn't. You need to get Brandon or someone in senior IT on it. Fast. And tell them exactly what I just told you. 3 hours later, my phone rang. Caller ID Brandon Kerr, I answered. Afternoon. Kevin, he said quickly, his voice tight. We're having a bit of a situation. I'm aware. James mentioned some secondary system. I don't see anything in the documentation about it. That's because it wasn't documented, I replied. I built it after the first bridge audit flagged gaps in our east perimeter. I never had time to do full documentation, remember? You all cut the knowledge transfer budget. Brandon's tone shifted. Can you consult? Just for a bit. Help us figure out what's going on. I almost laughed. You mean consult on the system you called outdated? Kevin, he said, this is serious. I know. That's why I'm charging my full rate. $750 an hour, 4-hour minimum paid up front. And I wanted in writing that I hold no liability. He went quiet. Then done. No thanks, I said calmly. That ship has sailed. He tried again, offering more money, even dangling the idea of returning full-time. I declined. I hadn't accepted another job yet, but I told him I had. It wasn't personal. It was self-preservation. Later that night, I checked the cybersecurity blogs out of curiosity. Front page. Trivar Financial suffers major data incident. Sources confirm possible breach of 30 client repositories. It didn't even take 72 hours. My system wasn't flawed. They just didn't know how to run it. The next morning, I got a message from Elaine Hudson, CTO of Sentinel Security Group. We'd crossed paths once at a security conference years ago. Her message was short and to the point. Heard you're available. Coffee at Pike Place tomorrow. We met at a quiet corner cafe the next day. She didn't waste time. I followed the story. She said, not your fault. Quite the opposite. I nodded, sipping my coffee. We're expanding our financial security division. She continued, "We need someone who knows the trenches, custom systems, risk modeling, threat mitigation. You'd have a team. Double what Trivar paid you. Interested?" I didn't hesitate. That night, I signed the offer. I was done fighting to be heard in boardrooms that only listened after everything burned. At Sentinel, they valued prevention, not just damage control. And in my gut, I knew something else. A Trivar's nightmare wasn't over yet. The next morning, I was reviewing Sentinel's welcome documents when my phone rang. An unfamiliar number from Seattle. I hesitated before picking up. "Kevin." "It's Diane." I closed my eyes for a moment. Diane from Product. One of the few who had ever spoken up for me. "What's going on?" I asked. "Have you seen the news?" I opened my laptop. Right there on the front pages of 3 major tech outlets. Trivar confirms major data breach. Financial client data compromised. Security restructuring fails. 40+ client systems affected. Stock plunges 28% as trust in Trivar evaporates. I sighed. "How bad is it?" "Disastrous," Diane replied. "They lost internal control within 48 hours. Firewalls failed. Quarantine systems didn't trigger. No one knows how to restore the infrastructure." I said nothing, bitterness creeping in despite the distance I'd tried to put between us. Not because I wanted them to fail, but because I knew they would. They thought they could dismantle a system they never understood and replace it with agility. Now that agility was burning the company down. "Where's Grant?" I asked. "In an emergency board meeting since this morning. CEO Stevens in full panic mode. They've brought in an outside security firm, but no one can decipher the old code you left behind." Diane lowered her voice. "Steven wants to bring you back. He says you can name your terms." I looked at the Sentinel logo printed on the document in front of me. A company that believed in me. A team that listened before things went wrong. "I can't," I said honestly. "I've signed with Sentinel, and I don't work with people who only call when the house is already on fire." That evening, I got a message from Steven himself. "Kevin, the board wants you back. Name your terms, anything." I didn't reply. 2 weeks later, Bloomberg published an investigative feature titled, "The Dismantling of Trivar, How Cost-Cutting Compromised Security." The article cited numerous internal emails and board meeting minutes. One excerpt stood out: "Budget request for security system documentation denied for the 6th time. Note, classified as unnecessary administrative expense." Meanwhile, Trivar's 3 largest clients publicly terminated their contracts. Reason: irreparable loss of confidence in security infrastructure and leadership risk governance. I didn't need to check the stock price to understand what was happening. LinkedIn told the story. Trivar employee profiles began updating en masse. A corporate exodus. Even Grant Kerr, the one who once called my system too rigid, had changed his job title to Strategic Technology Advisor, company undisclosed. And me? I was leading a team of 8 security engineers at Sentinel, one of our newest clients, a former client of Trivar. During the onboarding meeting, their CIO asked, "You used to work for Trivar, didn't you?" "I built their original security architecture," I replied plainly. "We figured. That's why you were our first call." I never sought revenge. But delayed recognition has its own way of knocking, quietly, steadily, and sometimes bearing unexpected rewards. 3 months after the breach, Sentinel Security Group had nearly doubled its team of financial security engineers. And then something I hadn't anticipated. James, the young engineer who used to work under me at Trivar, applied for a position. I interviewed him, and when I asked why he wanted to leave, he didn't hesitate. "I used to think I understood the system you designed. But when you were gone and everything collapsed, I realized I'd been leaning on something I never really grasped. I want to learn from the person who actually built it." I hired James. It was the right decision. He learned fast, listened well, and wasn't afraid to admit when he was wrong. I used to carry everything on my shoulders. Now I was learning how to train, to mentor, to pass on knowledge, and to build a team that could thrive without being dependent on any one individual. Sentinel didn't need a hero. They needed a system that could outlast any single person. Diane, who had witnessed everything unfold at Trivar, and who'd given me that early warning, joined us too. I asked her to lead our client communications division. She understood how vital trust is in the world of security, especially when clients had once been betrayed by the very companies meant to protect their financial data. We didn't just inherit Trivar's old clients. We began attracting local banks, pension funds, and even major nonprofits. And every time I heard the question, "Weren't you the one who designed Trivar's original security architecture?" I simply nodded and said, "Yes. But here, we do it better." Sentinel gave me more than a job. They gave me the chance to start over, this time with the resources and respect I had once only dreamed of at Trivar. No more cleaning up after the fire. No more chasing short-sighted development cycles and reckless cost-cutting. Here, I was paid to do it right, from the start. 6 months after Trivar's collapse, Bloomberg published another headline. Trivar officially acquired at record. Low valuation brand dissolved, tech assets fragmented, client trust lost. That same month, Sentinel received calls from 3 of the largest banks, former cornerstone clients of Trivar. They needed a new security solution. Not the move fast and patch later kind, but one grounded in caution, clarity, and long-term stability. In a strategic planning session, the executive from one of those banks asked me, "Do you think you can design a framework that could be adopted industry-wide? A standard that prevents another Trivar?" I pointed to the first slide in my presentation. The title read, "Understanding the Full Security Architecture, the Foundation of Trust." No longer a warning ignored. Now, it was a guiding principle for an entire industry. And in my heart, there was no feeling of triumph, just peace. Because this time they were listening, the irony wasn't lost on me. As Sentinel Security continued to grow, requests began pouring in from all over the financial sector, banks, credit unions, and fintech startups who had once admired Trivar's flawless security model from afar. Now they wanted the mind behind that architecture. Me. Not to rebuild Trivar, but to build something better from the ground up. Some clients were former competitors who had silently envied Trivar's track record. Others were new entrants, burned by flashy cloud vendors who promised plug and play security and left them exposed. But most were ex-Trivar clients. They didn't want another off-the-shelf tool. They wanted trust. And that I could build. One morning as I walked into Sentinel's Seattle office, Elaine, our CTO, stopped me with a look that said everything. "Marcus," she said, "you've got to see this." She handed me a folder. Inside were early drafts of a white paper being prepared by a prestigious security consortium. Title, "Avoiding the Trivar Trap, Prioritizing Institutional Knowledge and Security Infrastructure." There it was, in black and white, our entire downfall at Trivar dissected and studied as a warning for future generations. They cited the dangers of short-sighted restructuring, the consequences of neglecting documentation, and the irreplaceable value of custom architecture when managed by those who understand it. And then, on page 4, I saw my name. Marcus Lane, former lead security architect at Trivar, had repeatedly requested budget allocations for proper documentation and cross-training. Internal memos reviewed by the committee confirmed these requests were denied for 6 consecutive quarters in favor of accelerating product releases. It felt surreal. For years, I had been labeled too cautious, too slow, or even paranoid. But now, in the wake of a 40 million breach and the collapse of an entire firm, caution had a new name: wisdom. Diane, now our head of client communications, had arranged for me to speak at a cybersecurity summit in Chicago. It wasn't really my style. Public speaking always made my palms sweat. But I owed it to the industry, and to every security professional who had ever been told they were just overhead. When I stood at that podium, I didn't lead with scare tactics or technical jargon. I led with a story, my story. I spent 9 years building a system no one else understood. Not because I was irreplaceable, but because I was never given the resources to make myself replaceable. There was a hush in the room. I continued. Trivar didn't fall because of a cyber attack. It fell because it forgot that security isn't just a product, it's a culture. And culture can't be outsourced to vendors or replaced with automation. I spoke for 40 minutes. When I finished, there was a standing ovation, not for me personally, but for every unseen engineer who had stayed late, written custom scripts, patched legacy firewalls, and done the quiet, invisible work that keeps the digital world from burning down. Later that week, I received a handwritten note from one of the attendees, an older gentleman named Hall, a retired IT director from a credit union in Wisconsin. It read, "Misere. Lane, thank you for speaking the truth. I retired 2 years ago and sometimes wondered if any of it mattered. You reminded me it did. We were never just overhead. We were the backbone." I kept that note in my desk. At Sentinel, we made changes too. Every new system we rolled out came with full documentation, team training, and multiple eyes on every protocol. No one would ever again be the only person holding the keys to the kingdom. Security, I had learned, isn't about locking everything down. It's about making sure others know how to open the door safely when you're not around. And maybe, just maybe, that's the legacy worth leaving. The first major test of our new philosophy came sooner than expected. One crisp October morning, Elaine tapped on my office door. "Marcus," she said, "we've got a situation. Verafin just reported a breach." I raised an eyebrow. Verafin, that was Grant Felton's new company. "They're asking if Sentinel can step in," she continued. "Incident response. Emergency containment. Full system audit." Their rattle, I leaned back in my chair, trying not to smirk. It had been just under 6 months since Grant had walked me out of Trivar. And now, his latest company, one he joined preaching the same, move fast, gospel, was under attack. Again, Lane read my expression. "You don't have to do this," she said. "I know," I replied. "But I think I should," she nodded. "Good. Because I already told them we'd help, and that you'd be leading the team." So there we were, me, James, and 2 junior engineers from our incident response unit, stepping into a corporate war zone. Grant didn't speak during the first hour of the briefing. He looked older, tired, smaller. The breach had started as unusual traffic on their back-end server cluster, then moved laterally into several customer-facing environments. The firewalls didn't catch it. Their monitoring system didn't log it. Their compliance team didn't even know what had happened until clients started calling. Déjà vu. I listened patiently, reviewed their logs, and asked for access to their system diagrams. Their current security framework was flashy on paper, but paper, thin in practice. Outsourced components, no segmentation, outdated intrusion detection rules. "This is where the attacker came in," I said finally, pointing to a gap in their authentication proxy. "And this is how they moved across subsystems. No lateral controls." Grant finally spoke. "How did we miss this?" I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, I'd warned him about this exact vulnerability 3 years ago, back at Trivar. In a memo he'd flagged as overly cautious, and not aligned with aggressive timelines. Now, it had cost him again. "I'll need full administrative access," I said. "And we'll start restoring from the last uncompromised backup immediately." Grant didn't argue. He just nodded. The board was breathing down his neck. Clients were threatening lawsuits. And his CEO was on the verge of hiring an external firm anyway, if Sentinel hadn't stepped in. That night, as I sat in the war room with James and the team rebuilding Verafin's firewall rules from scratch, I thought about how fragile trust really was. Not just between clients and companies, but within organizations themselves. Security fails when leadership stops listening. 3 days later, the system was stable. We traced the attack vector, rebuilt their segmentation, and reestablished core protections. The CEO personally thanked me. Grant didn't. And that was fine, the work spoke for itself. Back at Sentinel, we added Verafin to our growing client list on a long-term retainer. Our financial sector division, once a quiet corner of the firm, had become a thriving hub. New hires were joining weekly. Many of them were former Trivar engineers, looking for a place that actually valued what they did. One afternoon, as I passed by the conference room, I saw James leading a training session on proactive breach detection. He'd grown into the role beautifully. Confident, respected, and meticulous. That was the difference. At Trivar, I'd built a fortress by myself. At Sentinel, we were building a legacy together. Before I left that evening, I added a line to our internal onboarding manual, in security. The biggest threat isn't the attacker. It's the belief that nothing bad can happen just because it hasn't happened yet. I'd learned that lesson the hard way. I wasn't going to let anyone else make the same mistake. 6 months after the Verafin incident, I received a handwritten card in the mail. It was from one of our newer clients, an elderly CFO at a regional bank. Inside was a short message. "Thank you for helping us sleep at night again." That hit me harder than any promotion ever could. I wasn't chasing headlines anymore. I wasn't fighting for budget scraps or trying to explain why security mattered. Now, I was part of a team that got it. That new real protection isn't about locking doors after the break-in, but reinforcing them before the threat even knocks. Looking back, I don't resent what happened at Trivar. It taught me the most important lesson of all: you don't protect what matters by moving fast. You protect it by moving right. So to everyone out there, whether you're still working, retired, or just trying to protect your family's data, Take your time to do it right. And don't let anyone make you feel like caution is a flaw. In this world, it's a superpower. If this story moved you, leave a comment below. Have you ever been told you were too careful? And if you believe experience and integrity still matter, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell. We've got more real stories where this came from. Stay sharp, stay grounded, and never underestimate the quiet ones.